Well, welcome. We're so glad, one, that you've made it this far in the day, right? This is a long day to really take in a lot of this rich information. So we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you joining our session to hear about CCMR outcomes and funding, really the focus around that shared leadership. That's really what I want to stand out to you in this session, is the work that it takes, and that it takes a shared leadership in order to get there. So we really hope you hear that throughout our session this afternoon. My name is Jennifer Symes. If you were here in the morning, I already did introduce myself, so I won't spend so much time, but Senior Director for Communications and Policy with E3 Alliance. I guess in my conversation, you probably got some note that I started out as a classroom teacher. I've been an administrator, have worked at state level with TEA, all the way to higher ed, worked at UT for a long period of time before joining E3, and so really have seen the different perspectives of education, kind of pre-K through post-secondary completion, if you will. And so just really excited to be here and engage in this conversation with you, but more excited about my co-presenters, because they are the real experts in this room that really are going to share their rich knowledge with you. So I'm going to first ask Alex to introduce himself.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Duran. I work as a coordinator in the Early College Programs Department in Austin ISD. Happy to share that I am a product of Austin ISD, graduated from Crockett in 2010. Remember, Mr. Lipton is my assistant principal, so that's cool in the world. And in my professional experience, I have worked in nonprofits and college access, college and career, AVID, and now BCHS, CCRSM. Anything that might have college and career in it somehow, I kind of touch it in some way. So I'm excited to be here today with you guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Kell, and I am the Director of College and Career Readiness and Career Technical Education for Manor ISD. My journey to this position has included work as a classroom teacher and as a K-12 counselor, doing all of the scheduling and all the weeks to make sure that these lovely weeks happen. I have ventured around the state of Texas, so rural, suburban, urban, small, medium, and large, north, south, east, and west, all points in between is my repertoire. So I love that she says expert, but if you know anything about CCMR or CT, there really truly is no expert, because it's always moving. The dial never stays the same. So glad you're here today. Hope we can provide good information for you.
Growing experts.
Growing experts.
We're all growing, right? One of the things, that we really feel is important, and hopefully you've also gotten the concept, is this idea of making connections and really the sense of belonging. So we want to make sure that you have time to get to know who's in the room as well, so we're going to do that in a second. But before, just kind of give you some of the agenda for this short time together, is going to do a college career military readiness overview, looking at most of the faces in this room. We don't have to really do as much of that, because we have such a mixed audience at the summit. We want to make sure that everyone is kind of on the same page there and understands what we're engaging in. We're going to talk about outcomes bonus funds, right? What are those? What do those look like? From Central Texas and then the state. And then in the college career military readiness, for those of you that may have heard me talk about it earlier this morning, we have a coalition made up of growing experts in the space across our 15 school districts in Central Texas. And they've developed a tool that's aligned to really start improving or identifying our students as they're reaching towards CCMR readiness. So we're going to share that with you, and then just kind of talk about high-level next steps. So before we get into that, we want you to connect. So if you all take just a couple of minutes and turn to the person next to you. If it's somebody you know, then turn to the person behind you or in front of you. I see a lot of groups and friends sitting together. If you'll just share your name, your role, what organization you work with, and then we want you to respond to the following question. When you hear CCMR, College Career Military Readiness, what opportunity comes to mind? When you hear CCMR, what opportunity comes to mind? So go ahead and go.
Intervention
right, wonderful. I just want some popcorn. What were some of the things that we heard about what opportunities come to mind?
Pipeline programs for our great company of HB.
You will run the world one day, I keep telling you this. Is it walk by the OHG?
It'll be better than husband.
Yes. Anybody else?
Sustainability.
Sustainability. Love that. Anybody else? What did we hear about opportunity comes to mind when we hear CCMR?
Aligned interests.
Aligned interests? Okay, how many of us in this room, if you'll raise your hand, you work at a school district in advanced academics, P-TECH, CTE? All right. How many of you in this room are administrators? You run the gamut. How many of you in this room are practitioners? Okay. How many of you in this room are community-based organizations?
We love y'all.
Don't we love all of them?
I'm trying to get free stuff.
Partnerships.
Who else do we have in this room? What are the other things?
I see IHE, people from
Oh,
HEC.
IHG, thank you, sorry.
You can raise your hand. Get your moment.
Anybody else? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Concordia, IHG's in the room. HEB's in the room. Okay, wonderful. So that really helps us to see how much information we need to dig into to really understand, especially look at CCMR. So again, thank you for being here. We're excited about this conversation. So when we talk about CCMR, College Career and Military Readiness, right, we're looking at who is graduating, and we're going to dig deeper into, especially for those that this is not your daily work, and understanding how our schools are held accountable for this work, in our K-12 space mostly, and what does that look like. But when we're talking about readiness, what we are saying, when we look at this percentage, right, we have academic year 2020-2021 and 2019-2020. If you actually go to our website, we released late last night because STAR scores and data came out much later than it usually does for our school district partners from TEA. But it is up to date now for 21-22. Remember, we're always going to have a lag there. But if you look at this for the state, and we're looking at Region 13 in the Central Texas area. So what that number is saying, for those of you that don't look at these numbers on a regular basis, that's 65.2%. It's saying of the students who graduated in 2020-21, 65.2% of them graduated ready, meaning they met a score on our Texas Success Initiative, our Texas test that assesses for college readiness, or they received a high enough exemption score on an SAT, ACT. There's other ways you can get there, but those are kind of the top three if we think about it. They've scored well enough to show us that they are ready to go into post-secondary, whether that's for a certificate, a credential, an associate, or a bachelor's degree when they've graduated. What you should also see is the 35.8 that did not, right, at our state level. And so this is why we continue to have conversations around college career military readiness. Because we want to make sure, right, I hear from people all the time, not every student is college material. Not every student needs to go to college or wants to go to college or should go to college. And for lack of a better term this late in the afternoon, I call BS on that. Right? As an educator, it is not my job to decide whether or not a student wants to go to college or not. It is my job as an educator to make sure that they graduate to go to college if they choose to, and they be successful. We also know at E3, 12% of students who do not go off to post-secondary, get some sort of credential, an associate or bachelor's degree, will live in poverty. Only 12% will not. Sorry, I said that. So I want us to think about that. If we continue to say the rhetoric that college is not for everyone, then we are saying it is okay to deem our students into poverty. Sorry, that was my question, my soapbox right there. I'll get off of it. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it to Erica on that note.
go back to the other slide, to the rating stuff. She pointed out that there were 38% students who didn't make it. I want to go back just to between the 2 years. If we look at 1920, there was 71% across the state, 59.6 for our region, and then there was a decline across the state the next year, and then we just had a very slight increase. As we heard all day today, we know what happened. There was this lovely thing called a pandemic. What we discovered when we came back to school is school, the way that we had been doing it, no longer matched the students when they returned back to us. So what we also heard is we had to rethink what that is. Okay? So as she was saying, it's not necessarily if they're college ready to go to a 4-year or a 2-year. We have to now think of what is the best fit, what is the best match for the lifestyle that that student and that family has chosen for themselves. Okay, so that's why it's post-secondary ready for us. When I'm saying it for myself and when I'm talking to the people who I lead, it's not about a particular pathway to a particular institution. It's about what is the best fit for the lifestyle and the career that you are molding for yourself. And a lot of times they don't have that answer at 18 when they walk across the stage of graduation. So the readiness piece, as we are learning and we're launching out for them, is you have to be ready for all of the options available. So I love that she had the word opportunity, because when CCMR, where opportunity is available, I teach options and opportunities. Because what I want them to have is you have the option to go straight to the workforce if you need to for a while, but you have an entry point. I call them on-ramps and off-ramps. You have an entry point to whatever the next thing is. I need to work for a semester, but then I may go to a 2-year. After my 2-year, what is my on-ramp to get to the 4-year? Or if I'm not going to the 4-year, have I added a credential that leads me to another higher level of employment based on where I started? Options and opportunities. Thank you, HB, for being in the room. Maynard is looking forward to having you in-house. But even with that, if I'm starting off as just the checker, and I hate saying just a checker, because the checker is important, because what happens at the checkout aisle is a lot of things that are going to happen about what the perception is of that company, the experience of the customer, and then what is leading me to whatever my next career opportunity is. That's the entry point to where we're going. So when we're looking at those students who, by state standard, we lost, was it because we lost them because we forgot to think of that? Yeah, we needed to get them back. We heard about truancy. But when they walked back into our classrooms, when they walked back in, were we preparing them for pre-pandemic life? Or did we think about what was happening to them and what they were facing post-pandemic? Because I can tell you what my seniors did. My seniors came back, they were juniors and sophomores, and we started talking to them, and they suddenly had a whole realization about something called debt. We'd never had conversations about debt before. We started having conversations about too much time and too much money was what they were hearing for college. And they wanted some assurances. When I leave here, I want to be able to work because I need to be able to pay bills, because I need to take care of. There was all these things. So again, options and opportunities. So how do I prepare you for those options and opportunities? I need to focus on what makes you college ready, if that's your option. I need to focus on what makes you career ready, if that's your option. And then we forget about the M sometimes. I have students who are going to the military. Military is going to prepare you for several things, but I need to prepare you for that too, okay? The readiness piece. So when we're talking about CCMR accountability from a K-12 folks, we live this, okay? This is what K-12 campuses, high schools in particular, get graded on for TEA. For those of you who are not living in this space every day. There's an A through F grade that every district, every high school, middle school, elementary school, who will get a grade based on how your students are performing in these domains. So to be college ready, as she had said, in order to say that at graduation you can enter into college and not have to take a developmental course, that's the ready piece. They enter ready to start on-level courses. They have to have met a post-secondary standard in one of those areas. The TSI test is the gold standard for a lot of things. Okay, that's the entry point for most. The next would be they earn dual credit courses if they are taking dual credit courses in school, specifically dual credit in English and math. Okay? Then they could also meet it by getting an AP exam or an IB exam if you offer those, but it has to be at a certain level, 3 or above. So all of my students who are taking those courses and they're only hitting a score of 1 or 2, they haven't met the standard. They got to get to the 3. Okay? So then earn an associate's degree. If you are a district that has an early college, high school, if they earn the full associate's degree, that's the measure if they're a part of that program. And then qualifies for an on-ramp credit course, that's the newest one. If you are offering on-ramps in your district, if they take the course and qualify for the college credit, then they meet the readiness standard. So there are various ways that a student can hit college readiness based on the offerings that are available to them in their district.
Just to clarifying on the TSI, there's 3 TSIs, right? Math, reading, writing.
They get a qualifying score in
All three.
all three.
So it depends on the side of the house you live on, right? So for us in K-12, right, it's English and math. When you look at higher ed though, and they're evaluating readiness, right, it's reading, writing, and math. So they separate those out, English language arts out.
So when we jump over to the career ready side, not that the other isn't important, but these are the students who are saying, I'm not necessarily thinking I'm going to go straight to a 4-year college, possibly a 2-year, I'm still not thinking. But these are the ones who have been along a pathway, usually in career and technology education. So they're moving towards earning an IDC, or an industry-based certification, as we say it in what, we love our acronyms. But they graduate with completed IEP and workforce readiness. This is our special education students. A lot of times they get put to the side. We don't think about them. It's like they have to have a livable wage as well when they leave. So if they're graduating with completed IEP and workforce readiness, then they have met the career readiness standard. And then they are graduating with an advanced diploma plan and receive special education services. What this means is we are not moving these students down to the lowest level of graduation. It used to be a procedure in place before that just because they were a special education student, we automatically lower down their graduation plan. We are not doing that anymore. Okay? And then to earn a level 1 or level 2 certificate, again, that's tied to the industry base or to something that they are studying specifically in a career path. The last one, the military piece, it used to be if they just raised their hand, they said they had an interest in military. We know we have to make things a little bit more difficult. You can no longer have just an interest, you have to actually enlist. Okay? So they do give us a little bit more time, because if you understand that some of our scholars don't make that decision until well after graduation, but it's an actual enlistment. Well, how do we know that? We have to actually get the form from the military that says they stood there, they raised their hand, and they enlisted. They're going to give us the names back. That's how we get the qualifier for that. So for each student that is graduating in a high school class, they have to hit at least one of these things in order for a district to hit a measure, as we call it, or to earn a point for that student. Okay? Every student in the graduating class is a part of the cohort, and every student is what's calculated that gets the A through F grade. That's just that part. The other side of that is, if they move over and they continue to do the things you want, the district can earn an outcomes bonus, which is extra dollars back to the district based on the performance of the student while they were in high school and what they do immediately after, or up to a semester after. So the outcomes bonus is tied to either college and or career ready at the same side. So in order for the district to earn outcomes bonus for college ready, they have to have earned the associate's degree, as we said, met the TSI requirement, as we said. College prep courses are not included in this. So they have to actually have taken the test and passed in the domains that we've said. And they have to enroll at a post-secondary education institution immediately following high school. So if they graduate in June, they have to enroll and attend in August for them to get the bonus from the college ready side. Okay? For the career side, they have to meet the TSI criteria, again, college prep classes, and they have to have earned the industry-based certification or the level 1 certificate. Again, immediately after, if not already, in high school. Same thing applies for military. They must enlist immediately following. Questions?
So I'm sorry, I'm going to keep harping on TSI. So how does it work? You cannot pass your TSI, so you're not eligible for any accountability, but you can still enroll in the post-secondary. So what would that look like? You got the bonus, but you didn't need accountability?
You don't get
You don't get the bonus.
So another way
You
to,
don't need to have, so like my daughter did not pass her math TSI, but she's enrolled in Texas State.
But they have to have both.
so another way to think about this, like when I'm explaining it to other educators, right, the green or the accountability, that is the land of orts. I got 10 different options to make sure that kid hits that indicator for college, for CCMR readiness. But for the outcomes bonus, it's the land of ands. So for both the college ready and the career ready, TSI criteria, TSIA2, SAT, or
I get you, so
ACT,
you have to.
and
Both. Okay. Isn't that funny though? That you're getting, the kid is actually doing what we said we wanted, they're gonna go get a 4-year degree. But the school is gonna get, it's just, I'll just say TSI is goofy. And it's just a goofy world.
Well, I think the important thing to connect to, especially for my IHE people in the room, sometimes this is new language to you from that perspective. If you've heard of HB8, if you've immersed yourself in that, this should start looking very familiar, because this was very much copied for HB8. HB8, for those of you in my K-12 space, is a community college finance bill that was passed this legislative session. And we are changing the way we fund community colleges for the first time in 50 years. And so what now is being done in community colleges is, before they were getting funded based on contact hours, but majority of their funding was coming. Meaning if I showed up and enrolled in the class, I got money for that student. Now our community colleges, it's not that they're not going to have some sort of formula for contact hours, but it's a much smaller percentage of their funding. Most of their funding is coming from outcomes bonus. So no longer can I get money for a student who's taking dual credit. That student actually has to earn the dual credit in a high-valued credential. So it has to be a dual credit course that actually is going to lead towards a credential that will earn them a sustainable wage. I will now get credit if a student transfers to a 4-year university. So if they came to me in community college, they successfully now transfer to a 4-year university. Similar to enrolling in 4-year for our K-12, they will get outcomes bonus dollars for that, right? So basically we are funding schools now for the outcomes in which they present. And so this and, whether or not we think it's wonky or not, we're saying if you were completely successful K-12, we want to make sure we prepared them, not just got them to enroll. Or we prepared them, but they didn't enroll. So you're getting outcomes bonus for that, right? So we're looking at those two different ways. But important to see the distinction, because there's accountability and then there's outcomes bonus funding that our K-12 partners have to look at and focus on.
So you're graded on the APREF on if you prepared them for what comes next. The funding comes on if they were able to act on what comes next. So the and piece is okay. So the thing we want to take away from here is this is the outcomes bonus formula that was left for the state. So there was $1,267,698,000 placed in the fund.
That's billions.
I'm sorry,
We're the
billions.
state. You're the state, so we're in billions.
Billions for the state that was allocated for us to have, but the amount that was paid out was significantly less than that. So the amount that was remaining for the entire state of Texas was that $1 billion that was left. Yes.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, a lot of funding was not allocated as planned. That's what it's saying, right?
The money was allocated. I'll put it this way. There was money put in a bank account for us to be able to draw down from as educators in school districts, and we only took out a very small portion of the money that was there.
Meaning that a lot of students did not meet the outcomes bonus threshold, therefore schools did not receive the funding because there was a very few students in our schools that met the outcomes bonus funding requirements.
So when I'm seeing this, I'm sorry, but what I'm seeing is the last slide was very confusing for me to understand. It seems like the system might be a little too complicated.
Well, the bar is.
We are friends now. We are friends now.
Just wait until you hear about how they back into new rules.
The biggest takeaway from this slide is just on the right-hand side, Central Texas. What we left on the table was the $47,613,000.
I like to point out, so the earlier slide we showed Region 13 data, which represents way more school districts. This column right here for Central Texas just represents the 15 school districts and ACCs and SACs.
Now, if they had a growth mindset, they would just allocate us the money.
Oh, yes, sorry.
I would contend this isn't all that complicated, it's just that we haven't had the
Yeah.
expectation for kids to meet both criteria of college and career, or as high schools, we don't necessarily have as much control if they go directly to college, but we can certainly put kids on a pathway to meet the college and career readiness. But I don't know if people understood that was the rules of the game. But it's not a completely complicated process, is it?
I don't think it's complicated. I think where the struggle becomes is around, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking on behalf of E3, is TSI.
Yes.
Right, there's a lot of, I don't think
It's not.
I don't know it's complicated.
I didn't say it was easy.
Right. But even though, so multiple measures was allowed during the pandemic. Multiple measures meaning that we could look at a variety of ways in which to enroll students in IH on the higher ed side. They did not have to have met TSI. So our colleges were able to experiment a little bit with how they push students through so that they didn't go into development class, or they could enroll students during the pandemic when all the data wasn't there. And actually what that study found, and we're pushing that the exemptions will change around TSI, but what the study actually found is the #1 predictor of readiness for students when they enter college and engage in a course and are successful is a student's GPA in high school. It was not the TSI. Whether or not they passed TSA or not did not yield success. It was the GPA, and that was a 2.5 or higher. And so we're starting to see newer data around GPA and how that really shows readiness over an assessment. And so I think that's where people get hung up is we're spending a lot of time prepping, pushing students through TSI prep and TSI this and TSI that, and not yielding the right outcomes because you're seeing how much money we're leaving on the table. It's because students aren't able to meet that threshold. And all we do is continue to spin our wheel on how do we get more consistent? How do we get them to pass? And I think that's the part that becomes a little complicated, yes.
So for the outcomes bonus, none of the other, minus the industry-based certification and the TSI exam, none of the other options plus enrollment get you the bonus. So like you couldn't do the on-ramps courses, pass and get the credit, and then enroll. It has to be the exam or the industry, even though there are other options. Okay.
As it's currently written in the bill.
Everybody wants that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a reason that college prep was not included or not applicable? Because that still allows students to enroll at some point, right? I mean, if they go through college prep, I mean, we have a college prep academy, we have no idea, and it's students college ready.
So some of the things that I've heard from the state is that a lot of those courses are not centralized, right? So the way that Hospital 5 is written is that it offers the school district's opportunity to enter partnerships with their local institution of higher education to develop these courses. So for us in Austin ISD, I see Jared over there. Thank you for meeting you in person for the first time. I love it. So because we're developing those, a lot of times they're not centralized. Perhaps they're not always like really big teach focused across the state. So I would say that's one of the contributing reasons why the state may say that those college prep Hospital 5 courses don't count. There are, movers and shakers that are trying to make that a thing, and we continue to fight that fight.
I think TSI was just seen as the most standardized option, kind of like ACT and SAT. So that's what they would put.
Also that the GPA is not standardized across the state.
Correct. Don't hear that. GPA is also not standardized across the state.
Yes. So the big piece for the funding is if we're not receiving the funds to be able to help and put back into the district, what do you get to do if you do get the funds back? So how are we generating funds? It allows for teacher training and professional development centered around CCMR, work-based learning opportunities, which is what tied back to CTE. This is what allows us to be able to have our student scholars and students go and work with our partnerships in an actual learning environment. Student preparation for the CCMR content, so putting back into, even though we don't want to say fully test prep, but having those prep opportunities and extra instructional opportunities around CCMR content, counseling and advising services. How many of you have all of the counselors you need for all of the students? How many of you could use more? When we were talking to the IHE, we heard things about just college coaches and mentors and things that could help students along. But outcomes bonus funding could do that as well. CTE, industry-based certification activities. Sometimes we don't have what we're needing to see in certifications because we don't have the funding to pay for the certifications and give them to the students. We're properly prep them for that. This could be used for that. And then college and career readiness school model. So if you were looking at adding an early college high school or a P-TECH or a different program to the programs that you already have, this funding would help allow that as well.
And the reason we wanted to throw this slide in here, especially if you work as a CFO, or you're a superintendent in this room, or administrator, this is really important because oftentimes we lost high school allotment, it got reshifted, and we got outcomes bonus. And oftentimes we hear, oh, outcomes bonus is just high school allotment. It is not. It is a very specific set of funds that is designed to support the work that is going on in CCMR, whether that's CTE, P-TECH, advanced academics. And so oftentimes in working with our school districts, it's tracking down where is that additional funds so that we can put it into those best practices that we've identified so we can better support our students, so we can increase the students who are ready and enrolling in post-secondary. Then we can generate more of that outcomes bonus funding, right? But if we don't actually have access to that money in the right departments, then we're leaving a lot of that on the table because it's not going towards the right things. And so we wanted to make sure that people heard why is this money important and how it can be spent. It's directly to go back in and use those promising practices to improve student outcomes.
So,
I think I'm going to
going back to that slide with the money that we left behind, was some of that also remaining funds because maybe a district was awarded outcome bonuses, but then they didn't spend it properly, and
No,
or
this is left on the
just
table and that they did not
from the
get
very
it
beginning?
because of
Okay.
their number of students that were CCMR.
Is that still earmarked or back to general funds?
No, it's still earmarked. So the good thing about outcomes bonus money is it won't go away. It's not like I won't say that out loud. Okay, yeah. It's money that is there. It's going to continue
Our
to go.
disappearing tax dollars?
I was going to say TIA. Okay. I do want us to have time to talk, but we've had this, and I really want to get you to the meat of our indicator tool and allow you to engage with that. So I want to move us along, giving you time. But you will have time to connect and engage more, I promise. But now we're turning to Alex.
Alrighty, so today our presentation talks a little bit about shared leadership. So if I see several members of our CCMR coalition, so if you guys would please stand up. I see at least 4. So this has been the tool that we're about to talk about has been a collaborative effort between all these educators and school districts to kind of figure out a draft tool. A tool that can be modified for the use of your campus, your district, the size, all those things could kind of be a part of that. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So some of the things we want to highlight, right, is that we have educators from Austin ISD, Leander, I can't remember. Thank you. Hey, I suck at life. Building this tool together, but while we may have similar roles, right, our work does not end when we meet once a month or quarterly, right? It's taking that knowledge back to our respective school districts and not also engaging educators on our team, but as we talked a little bit about earlier, right? Who are other people that touch this work that needs to be involved? Jennifer mentioned the CFO, right? Your finance department to make sure that the dollars you were getting are actually feeding back into that work. Your team's person, right? Are you getting credit for the successes that you know that you have? What is the logistical process for that? Next slide.
Yeah, and just real quick, I think the real important thing here is that oftentimes we treat a lot of these as silos, right? Like, well, that's the director of advanced academics job, or that's so-and-so. And if you saw what schools are held accountable for and what it means to prepare a student and put them on a pathway that affords them the opportunity to go into their passion space, like Erica was saying, whether that's straight to the workforce or a credential or an associate's degree or a 4-year degree, we have to work together. And so this tool that they've developed is not just about those who work in CCMR use this tool. It's about how do we scale this tool across our campuses, and everyone who engages with a student is preparing them for what's next. Sorry.
Alrighty, so quickly, you guys can look at our shared goal and strategy. And so our big thing here, right, is what can we do, what processes do we need to follow to lessen the gap between what is allotted for CCMR outcomes bonus funding and how much we actually get. Alrighty, so what you guys have in front of you is our draft people of our CCMR case management tool for student success indicators. So one way that we started to think about this, right, is like, what is a year at a glance? What are the things that we can do to start tracking the student success indicators for CCMR accountability and outcomes bonus funding? So we engage not only our coalition, right, but our respective districts, looking over at Dr. Servants, our Director of Advanced Academics in Austin ISD, guiding us, hey, what is the timeline for AP when it comes to registration and exams and score release, and some CTE and some other ones there. So our goals here, right, is to develop common language across systems, coordinating experience and expertise, collaboration, and then developing some academic or programmatic intervention for students to increase our funding opportunities. All right, so what we're going to do is that we want to spend some time looking at the tool, and then we're also going to pass out 2 student profiles, 3 student profiles. Review the profiles, and then we will probably put back up the indicators, just so you have a snapshot of all of them, the ands and the ors. And then we'll answer these questions. So based on the student profile, how do you feel? What is contributing to their readiness? What is to ensure that they're successful in a post-secondary pathway? Would the district receive accountability points for this student? And would the district receive outcomes bonus funding for the students?
We want to share. I just realized I was trying to get everyone to share.
So on the draft, you all, it is, as he said, it's a year at a glance. What we wanted to start with was, I heard someone say it's confusing to keep up with all of the things. It is. There are a lot of things that go into CCMR, so what we wanted, the initial piece of the draft is just to plan out a year at a glance what happens under each one of those measures. Like you said, when does AP happen? When should TSI happen, best practice? What's happening with certifications? So that you can at least know what things to be looking for and at which month. Because with a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts, some things get lost. If you heard Alex earlier, he was saying we were noticing some things were not getting reported. That's the key piece to this, because what is not reported in your SIS system does not get sent to TEA, and therefore you do not get points for it either in accountability or funding. So we had to make sure that we were capturing all of the data that needs to be reported, and it's being properly put into your SIS system so that it can be reported properly to TEA. For example, if you have 25 students that you know who have earned an associate's degree, but you only put in 2 of them, then you lost 23 points. And it's simply, that's a data entry error, okay? So knowing when these things should happen during the year, when these testings happen, when these submissions happen with PEEMS, when the testing happens, kind of to garner that work and that collaboration, as we said, a shared collaborative in your district of who's responsible for the certification piece, who's responsible for the AP testing piece, who's responsible for the TSI piece. When should that information be put in? Who is checking it? Who is verifying it? Who's submitting it? That's the draft piece. Okay.
And it's going very much into the weeds. I understand for a lot of you that don't do this work, but it's really to give that lens of what is the work that is taking place in K-12 and what are those check marks that have to go on in order to get us to a student graduating, ready to move on into post-secondary, and then our IAGs and institutions being ready to take them and transition them in and prepare them for workforce based on that next step, right? Oftentimes, there's not a lot of synergy or alignment between what's happening in K-12, IAG, and workforce. And at E3 and the work that we're doing is we're trying to bring the 3 together. I know we're trying to do that as a state, but we're also trying to do it together of working with our workforce partners. That's why we've invited like HGB in the room to really understand what are the pathways and the jobs available and the skills that are needed. And so that's why we wanted this exercise to kind of open that lens for you so you could think about it from that perspective. So you have 3 students in front of you.
May I ask you to go back to the CCMR slide?
You have 3 students in front of you. What I'd like is that you're sharing, just work with someone next to you. You might work in a larger group of 3, we're kind of set up a little bit weird. But work together and just pick one of the students and use that data tool to answer the question.
So if you take dual credit courses, you have to pass it. Or is that just our district, or is that a standard across the board? If you're enrolled in a dual credit, if it's an English or a math especially, you have to
Yes.
pass
Yes.
In order to take that.
To take the, yes.
Okay.
But there are also work-based, non-academic dual credit courses, which don't require.
Gotcha.
I do want to put the narrative out there, right, that doesn't mean they should not attempt to pass TSI, right?
Correct.
Just to make sure, like, those classes are still rigorous.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of reading and writing, so we don't want to limit those opportunities, but it's definitely not a requirement.
Gotcha.
to take.
Okay.
We don't need to do it. I think
We gotta be like, we gotta brag. So for the indicator for this right here, 3 hours, 8 hours, an hour of the or 9 hours a day. I know you guys were having some really great conversations, and we hope that the conversations do not stop here in the space of our room, but we do have a time limit to kind of keep you guys on. So we do want to go ahead and just look at one student. So let's start off with Miguel Angel, the first one. And can someone answer one of the questions that was posed?
not give you enough information of whether or not he has met the AP indicator, because you don't know what he scored on the AP exam. Also, it doesn't technically know what 30 hours of college credits people receive, but knows that he had it. So it's fine.
Did he attend Texas State?
Yes.
I says he will be attending.
That's for the hours bonus, that would be the question, yeah.
If he is in.
So once it's verified by the NSC, right? Damn.
And in those 30 hours, did you get an associate's degree, or were there just cumulative 30 hours?
Most associate's degrees are 60.
That's right, you're 60.
Fun fact, any study that I do, I'm always Miguelangel, so that's why I always use that name. I was in Dr. Seb's dissertation.
I know this is a side note, but for that HB8 outcomes bonus funding for community colleges, it's 15 hours and it has to be succinct in the same college, which is really important because some of our students do UT Permian Basin and ACC or other Temple or Tarleton. So that's going to be an impact too as we work with our K-12 around the dual credit students who are taking in the other day.
So based on the answer, would the district earn an accountability point for Alex?
Yes.
Alrighty, let's move on over to Jason. Anybody look at Jason? And then looking at, do we know if he's earned an accountability point?
Yes.
How?
He's already earned one of his IBC,
IBC.
Is it on the list?
but he doesn't have the IBC.
We wouldn't be, well, depending on which list we're talking about, right? That's an extension activity.
That's a different
Inside joke.
training session.
How much time do we have left for the survey?
1 minute.
Okay, so let's just move on to the survey then.
Yeah. So I think, just to kind of wrap up, I know this is speed. This is like a speed round of CCMR accountability and outcomes bonus. But we do hope, to use the word, that it's ignited you to think about what does need to happen. Like, maybe you've identified some change that already needs to happen. Like, wow, I didn't realize this is what K-12 is going through. I had a really good conversation with the provost at Texas State after the morning session and came up and said, hey, I really need to talk to someone about TSI. We have a lot of students at Texas State, and was really trying to understand what's happening in K-12. Not blaming like what's happening there, but like what is the work that they're doing and how can we better align because we're trying to figure this out over here. And I was like, oh, you need to come to our CCMR coalition meeting. And we were actually just talking about this last meeting. I was like, we need to bring in IHEs. But I think that's hopefully igniting of like what does CCMR mean? What does it look like in our state? What are we valuing, right? And what is that accountability we're putting on our schools on what we value? And are we valuing the right things? And so thinking about that from that perspective. So I do hope that this has ignited some of that conversation, but also really said that if we don't collectively work together, so I love that this room was beyond our K-12 partners. Because what it shows us is that IHEs are interested, our communities, our base organizations are interested, and understand that if we don't collectively all play a role in this, then it is almost impossible to get students beyond where we are to that economic mobility that we are seeking for all of them, right? So I hope that you walk away with a little bit of that in you. Sorry, I don't have time for questions. But I'm just kidding. If you're willing to stay a minute, and then I'll listen to your break time and transitioning back to the last session, or the closing session. But here is the survey. If you could please fill it out. We love the feedback. It helps us plan for next year. So any and all feedback you can give. And while you're doing this, if you do have a question, we're happy to answer it. And we, of course, will stay behind if you want to ask, not in front of everybody.